So now once you have your elements booklet sort of all folded up and you got it lying flat again, the next thing you're going to be doing is picking a silhouette. So for me, I chose to use a pineapple, which I have already used tracing paper to get all the inner detail, but then I also created sort of just a simple silhouette. So what you can do is you can draw your silhouette, and if it has inner detail like this, then I will give you a piece of tracing paper in order to trace your drawing. If it's just an outline, then you can use a piece of cardstock or the outside of a folder or something that's going to be a little bit more stiff to make your stencil. So both of those templates are what I'm going to be using as I'm working on my elements booklet. I'm going to go ahead and label very lightly where each element goes. So we're going to start with line, and then we're going to go to shape, and then this next one is going to be color, and then we're going to have value, and then we are going to do texture, and then space, and then form. So by labeling where each one goes, I'm going to know whether I want to use a detailed tracing or a silhouette tracing. So for the line one, for instance, I'm going to use the detailed one. So all I'm going to do is erase the word line now. I will remind you guys what order things are in. That way, once you erase your word, you'll still know where they go. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my tracing paper onto my little section there. And then I'm just going to go ahead and start tracing. It does take a little bit of time, and you absolutely can tape it down if you want to. And I'm not going to sit here and make you watch me trace the whole thing. But essentially, the way that tracing paper works is once you have graphite on one side, you can use the reverse image, which is what I'm doing, or you can go ahead and put the graphite onto the other side and then trace the front image. But like I said, for me, the pineapple looks the same in both directions pretty much, and it works for my project either way. So to make it a little bit easier on myself, I'm just using the reverse image basically. And then the nice thing is, once I'm using the same tracing again on a different section of my booklet, I can trace it either way. So I could have it go frontwards or I could have it go backwards. So it allows you to have a little bit of variety within your silhouette there. So you get the gist of the tracing, and then you would remove the tracing paper, and you can see that it shows up there. You will probably have to darken it. But once again, since that is my line example, I'm okay with having to darken it because I'm going to be adding some Zentangle lines and designs behind it. So then the next one is shape. So for this one, I'm going to use a more simple silhouette. Or if you have a stencil made out of cardstock or something, you could go ahead and use that for something like this. And once again, I'm just going to go ahead and trace through. Apparently, I'm going to break my lead while I'm doing so. And you will notice that I am using a mechanical pencil for this particular step. And the reason for that is that I feel like the mechanical pencil actually makes a thinner, sort of more exact line. So a lot of times when we are drawing, and especially shading, we'll use drawing pencils. But for this type of a project, you can use either type of pencil. So once again, I'm not going to sit here and make you watch me trace the entire thing. But basically, I'm going to be doing this in each and every single section, depending on what sort of design and idea I have for that particular element, will determine whether I use the silhouette or the more detailed one. So there I've got the shape of my pineapple. So this one would be fully detailed. This would be more of a shape. The next one would be color. So I would have to decide which one I want to use based on sort of how I want to portray color. So for instance, if I want to do one like warm colors in the background and cool colors on the actual pineapple, I would probably use the simple silhouette. So that I could do a fade of the warm colors in the back and then a fade of the cool colors in the actual pineapple. For the value one, I'm going to use the more detailed one so that I can shade it like a real pineapple. For the texture one, I'm going to actually use the silhouette, and then I'm going to glue little wadded up pieces of tissue paper, green where this part would be, yellow where this part would be, and then a different color in the background so that I actually create a texture on that space. The next one is space. So I would want to figure out some sort of way to make it obvious that that pineapple is sitting in space, not outer space, even though that could be a particular option depending on how you illustrate it. But I would have to think more about how I want to show space before I know which type of silhouette I would want to use. And then for form, my plan is to use the simple one, but then to modify it and alter it to turn the different parts of the pineapple into sort of their own forms. And I'll show you a little bit more about what that looks like. But in the meantime, I'm just going to go ahead and while you are still watching the demo, just continue adding my silhouettes in there, but I'm not going to necessarily say anything else about what I'm doing at this point. Just going to go ahead and get them all traced on there. And then I will go ahead and continue establishing exactly what each element is going to look like. I should also point out, sorry, I know I said I wasn't going to talk, but I should also point out that since I have two different types of templates, I could use a combination. So for instance, if I wanted to do the top part full detail, and then the bottom part just as a shape from the simple silhouette, I could. And in fact, I might do that on the form example, because then that way I can make sure that I really make it look like it has 3 dimensions. Because after our discussion of the elements of art, our kind of review of those, you will have a better understanding of what each one is, and hopefully will be able to come up with some ways to illustrate each one into these spaces. So this step is a little bit tedious, depending on which silhouette you choose. So you do want to choose a silhouette that you can do relatively quickly, but you do want to still choose something that is going to be interesting. I always recommend picking something in which you are personally interested in. That way you just are more able to create something. Anytime we pick a subject matter that matters to us, that work is usually going to turn out better because we have more of a vested interest in it. So we're more willing to spend the time and the energy and the effort necessary to create something. And not every single tracing is going to be perfect. Tracing paper is not meant to be super dark. So you are probably going to have to kind of look for your lines a little bit, clean some of them up, add some of them back in, darken them a little bit. That's part of the process. And if you don't want to hold your paper down the way that I am doing, you can just tape it down. I probably honestly should have done that with this one. So there I've got my pineapple for line, I've got my pineapple for shape, and then the pineapple for color. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and use my simple silhouette, but I'm going to use it sort of backwards, because now I have graphite on both sides of my tracing paper, so I can pick and choose which direction I put things. And in fact, if I wanted to put it upside down, I absolutely could. So let's just go ahead and do that for fun. There is no one who says that things have to actually be in the correct direction or order on something like this. Art is about creativity. And this project, even though it seems like a pretty simple, basic sort of project, does require and encourage a lot of creativity, because you are essentially figuring out ways that you can show each of the elements of art using one specific object. And remember, the media that you use is completely up to you. You do not have to just use one medium. You can absolutely use colored pencils, markers, crayons, pen. You can use Sharpie, you can use paint, you can use tissue paper like I was saying that I was going to do on the texture one. So there's a lot of variety and a lot of options with this particular project. The main goal is to make it obvious which element is in each section.